Imagine losing your best guitar, something worth thousands of dollars, and losing it for $100. In the days before eBay and the internet and reverb and all that, this could be a common occurrence. Being a musician and struggling to make ends meet can be a very difficult lifestyle, and the real cost of chasing your guitar dreams and why it's still worth it. That scenario that I just described, man, it's happened to me a few times back in my early days of time in Nashville. And, I have talked about on my channel, I used to work in a pawn shop in Los Angeles, and I used to see all kinds of big time musicians that had played on, Grammy winning records and legendary multi-million selling recordings. And I'd see them coming in the pawn shop and pawning over and over again, pawning their instruments, their jewelry, anything that they could get some return on. And it became a common occurrence. I mean, it was pretty much every day. It'd be, oh, here's the guy from Earth, Wind, and Fire. Oh, here's the guy from Robert Palmer's band. Oh, here's this guy. And people would go, hey, man, you know who that is? And I'd be like, really? And I'm like, yeah. When I was in Los Angeles, most of the time I had a day gig, and that's how I would survive. But when I got to Nashville, there was a lot of times where I just, played guitar, especially in the beginning. And, man, it was hard back in those days to make ends meet. Broadway was not bustling with cover bands, on every corner. And, man, frankly, the town was kind of a ghost town. And while you had the country music industry, and if you could get on one of those tours, you'd be making decent money and be able to afford, to be a musician. Without that, you were pretty much left to just picking, getting things and filling out a calendar, living and dying by your calendar. And if you had a good month, then, everything would be fine. And if you had a bad month, man, things could be really, really tough. So, the financial costs of, chasing your guitar dreams, gear, has always been expensive. Good gear has always been expensive. And I can say, actually, right now, affordable gear is actually, it's actually pretty good. And, man, if you were really hurting for money, and you did need to sell an instrument, the difference between now and back then is now if you needed to sell an instrument or move something, you could try and sell it on Reverb and you could get a lot more money for it. But, before that, man, there weren't really a lot of options for people to sell their own gear. It was difficult. And especially if you needed money at the last minute. At the last minute, you were $100 short for rent, or you didn't have any money to buy food or whatever. Oftentimes, pawn shop was the only option, and they just did not pay a lot of money for a guitar. And frankly, if you took too much money from a pawn shop, it would be harder to get your instrument back. So, back then, gear was, fairly expensive. And, if ends didn't meet, often it was a trip to the pawn shop. The reality is, things are better now. Like I said, affordable gear is much more, a better quality these days. I've been really shocked when I get a piece of, affordable guitar or an affordable pedal, and I'm shocked that, hey, man, if you know how to play, if you know how to get a decent tone, man, you can make these things sound good, but it wasn't always that way. When you're getting started, paying for lessons, and look, once you do get started, and back in the day, man, imagine this. Imagine having to pay for studio time in the same studios where people like Van Halen and Garth Brooks or whatever were recording their music. It was not cheap. And that is why, back in the day, my time in Los Angeles, when I was in my prime and was full of ideas and full of energy, man, I don't have any professional recordings, of my band. And we did do some stuff. We did some stuff at a little studio on EMI on Sunset, and we did some stuff at IRS Records. But the only copies I ever had were on cassette, and man, I don't know where those cassettes are now. So, we don't have the masters, we don't have the stems, and who knows, they probably ended up in a landfill somewhere. And that was the reality back in those days. But now, man, you can get a computer and a couple of mics, and you can make a professional recording of your band. So things are actually better now as far as these things go. But the reality is time cost. If you think about money, and time equals money. If you think about that, the hours spent practicing, networking, and working side gigs to fund your passion, man, it's going to take a lot of time, an extreme amount of time. And it's the same thing for gigs, man. If you have to learn a bunch of songs, and I've talked about it on this channel, learning 40 songs in a day or learning 40 songs in a week or whatever it is you may have to do. If the gig pays $150 and you spent 5 days learning the songs, or let's say you spent 4 hours a day for 3 days learning the songs, man, that cuts into what you're making, because per hour, man, you'd be making peanuts if you added it up that way. Now, the emotional costs of chasing your guitar dreams, dealing with rejection, burnout, and the pressure of making ends meet, man, it can be tough, man, because, on one thing, you're playing, it's the joy of your life. Playing music is a beautiful thing, and it's an incredible high when you play a great gig. And man, sometimes some of the best gigs that I've ever played with some of the best musicians in the world, man, we'd be lucky to make $50 each. And, we would come off the stage extremely, elevated from having this great musical experience. And then the downside would be dividing up what little money there was to divide up. And that can be depressing when you realize, man, I just played a gig. It was incredible. Not many people heard it. And at the end of the night, man, the ends just do not meet. Now, the reason why it's worth it, the thrill of being on stage, it is probably the greatest joy in my life, besides having a family and besides having my daughter and spending time with her. Being on stage and hearing the thrill of the crowd. I can remember we played a gig played with Trick Pony, right? And Taylor Swift opened for us. And it was it's a little smaller arena, probably like a 10,000 seat arena. And they used to, imagine this, I learned their set, right? But then right as we're going on stage, I get told, I need you to do a 10-minute solo tonight. I would get these, I want you to play for this. And I'm like, I'm for one, it'd be one thing if I came just from the Strip and now I'm go play your 10-minute solo. I would have had no problem playing a 10-minute solo, but I was now in Nashville mode, and in Nashville mode, you learn the parts on the record, and you go play the show, and you nail the solos, and that's it. And being told all of a sudden now I got to do this 10-minute solo. Well, I don't remember what I did. I probably just did what I do on this channel when I have to demo something. I probably just started ripping some leads or something, but I can remember doing something, getting down, I was probably down on one knee or whatever, and playing a solo and hearing that crowd erupt. And, it's one of the greatest feelings in the world, man. If you can get a chance to experience that, to do something, learning what you have to do to get the crowd to react. That's a bit of showmanship. And if you can figure that out, man, there is no greater thrill in the world than playing something and nailing a solo and like, in front of the crowd. It's one of the greatest feelings in the world. And the other thing that is amazing is the connections you make with other musicians. Man, there's certain musicians that I've played with over the years where it was just telepathic, man. I'd play with a guy I'd never played with before. I'd be playing rhythm guitar and I'd be hitting certain accents, and the drummer would immediately pick up on that stuff and be playing right along with me. And it's just like, man, that's one of the most incredible feelings, that communication. Somebody's listening to you, and they're reacting because you're making up stuff. You're adding stuff to the groove, and they're adding stuff to the groove with you. There is no better feeling than that. And that's why I always liked playing with musicians who listen. Not every musician listens. A lot of musicians listen to themselves. But when you're in a creative situation with musicians and playing music that's not just, by the note, that can be one of the most amazing feelings in the world. And the feeling of creating something meaningful and sharing it with the world, that's another thing, man. Writing a great song and hitting that. Nowadays, you just hit that button and all of a sudden it's uploaded, and it, within, I don't know whether it takes days now or whatever, but, picking a release date and then boom, your song is out in the world. That is an incredible feeling. And, it's tougher now. I think, without label support and stuff like that, it can be difficult to get your music actually heard. But still, the fact that you can create something and share it with the world, and the same thing with this YouTube channel. When I get comments from people from all over the world, man, it absolutely amazes me. And thank you for all the people that contribute by leaving their comments. It's just an amazing experience. Having a sense of purpose and fulfillment that comes from following your passion, even when it's tough, that is an amazing feeling. You've got a purpose and you're fulfilled. That is probably one of the greatest things that you could ever feel. And the beauty of guitar playing and why it's so unique and it's a worthwhile pursuit. I've had many regrets in my life, but none of them have been playing guitar or following my passion. It's been a lot of ups and downs, but all in all, I can say, man, it's enriched my life. I've met my wife. I've got my family now, and I'm in a new place doing something different. Still talking about guitar, still playing guitar, but sharing a unique message with the world. And that is a very fulfilling thing as well. Now, the thing that I would offer some insight on this, learn to manage your finances while chasing dreams. There's a lot of guys who make very smart gear purchases and some that balance day jobs. Sometimes you will have to do other things on the side to hustle, whether that means flipping gear. And what do I mean by flipping gear? There are ways to buy gear inexpensive. If you know guitars, if you know pedals, if you have a area of expertise, become an expert on what things sell for, and learn where you can turn a profit. You could walk in to a guitar center or a pawn shop and wheel and deal and get a deal on something, and maybe you can flip it on Reverb, or maybe you know somebody who's looking for that instrument and you can resell it. These kind of things happen all the time. The same thing with trading. Maybe you've got some piece of gear that somebody wants and they want to trade, and maybe you can trade it for something that you can then turn a profit on. There's lots of ways to figure. And I know I've had friends that told me that were pro musicians, and they had buddies who that's all they did was just wheel and deal. They were one of those people that just constantly moving gear in and out. And I saw them in Nashville on Facebook Marketplace. I saw people that seemingly did that all the time. And that's one way that you can help finance your career in music. And you've got to stay motivated during tough times. It's very easy to get depressed and start to wallow in your feelings, and man, try and stop that, nip that in the bud, so that you're able to keep focusing. Man, try not to get depressed. Try to stay away from the booze and anything else that you're gonna come down from. It sometimes is harder to come down from a bad gig or a good gig than having to mix other things into it that are just going to make that low even lower. Keep your passion alive. Try to learn new styles, new things. Always continue playing with different musicians if you can. Man, that can really mix things up and make things interesting when you're constantly working with different players. And then focus on the small wins. You're gonna have small victories, and man, pat yourself on the back, because you know what? You've got to do that to keep going. Look, I know it's hard, but every sacrifice I've made is written in the bends, the slides, and the chords I play. And I do it all over again, because the sound of a well-played note, the energy of a live crowd, or even just jamming alone in a quiet room, that's the stuff that dreams are made of. So if you're chasing it too, don't stop. It's worth every damn penny, hour, and heartbreak. And I salute you.